I have a Gravatar associated with my email account. Don't know how to change it. Don't know where to go to find it. I don't know. But occasionally it just pops up on a service and infects it with a picture that I uploaded in, I'm going to guess 2011.
Wow. That was a late Gravatar for you. I think mine was the first week of Whiskey Media. The first week I was a giant player. It might have been right after the site launched, but it was definitely 08. I think Jeff or somebody, like we were using Gravatars for something there.
Oh, we were hot on Gravatars at Whiskey. This is my last.
It felt like such an innocent decision. Felt like, it was an innocent time. It was a simpler time. And I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to, I will upload this picture of a hand grenade that looks like Pac-Man.
Yeah, why
not have a default avatar that just shows up wherever I go? This definitely won't dog me for years and years.
Look, it could be worse. You could have been really into anime for a brief period in 2009 and uploaded an anime girl and then that has some unfortunate connotations now.
Thankfully, my anime phase, which for the record lasted no longer than 90 days, occurred somewhere around 1996. So I'm safe. Any pre-Gravatar, post-anime pre-Gravatar era.
So this is my final Gravatar. I for a while there, I was changing the Gravatar just to mock conversations that were happening in our office when we were in the basement at Whiskey. Sure. Just somebody would say something stupid and I would change my Gravatar to that and then it would show up in AIM 4 days later or something. But this one is the blockhead that Cal made, the tested blockhead that became the mascots for the site for years.
That's a great design.
Yeah, it was really good. It makes me happy still. So, thanks, Cal.
I never thought about it. But I could have just gone to gravatar.com all this time and maybe changed my Gravatar. But anyway, I just want to point out real quick, because I am on gravatar.com now, that at the bottom of the webpage, it says millions of avatar images are being served over 8.6 billion times per day. Join some of the other sites that use Gravatar, and underneath that, they have logos for American Idol and the Battlefield 3 battle log.
Oh yes, the Battlefield 3 battle log. It's really that was the peak of battle log technology. If you think about it,
only the hottest of current content purveyors here at Gravatar.com.
I have a good friend who will remain nameless who sent me a note one time and was like, "Hey, do you have any idea how to change the Gravatar?" Because she had apparently deleted her Gravatar account, but it was still cached and associated with the email address. And then she couldn't recover it. And it was basically in some sort of nightmare null. It was, the place that they send the bad guys in Superman 2 to?
Yes.
The Phantom Zone?
Yes,
it's basically there.
The prison of the mind.
Yeah, so she's basically she's stuck with the same Gravatar from 2012 or 2010 or something.
The Gravatar will just hang around, man. It will hound you unto insanity. You know what the Gravatar is the digital version of that gremlin from that Twilight Zone episode on the airplane wing.
The one that Will Shatner sees?
Sure, yes. But God, that is Shatner, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, the Gravatar is that. It's just there, always lurking around the edges.
I didn't realize that Gravatar had been bought by WordPress, by Automatic.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I heard a story about that once, and this may be an apocryphal story, but the story I've always heard about Automatic is that the guy who started WordPress, whose name was Matt, made WordPress because he wanted his photo blog. He wanted to be the number one Matt on the internet, which is why every WordPress blog has a link back to his blog on it at the bottom in the footer by default.
I see.
Yeah.
That is a good pure reason to start a blogging service.
It's probably not true. I don't care if it is or not because I love the story so much. So I'm gonna spread it. You're welcome.
While we're talking Apocrypha, I'm going to assume that him becoming the number one Matt is why no other Matt can ever be referred to by their first name again.
That's true. They're all Matthews or Matty
or last name. Sorry, Matts.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad, and I am desperately trying to find one of the 18 Chrome windows that I have open here that has our Gmail.
It's too many Chrome windows, Brad. It's too many. Wait, I thought you were on Firefox now.
No,
you still a Chrome?
Yeah, old habits.
Man. Keep giving him that data, man.
I know. I just
feed the machine.
Just a spigot of data spewing into the gaping maw of Google. Okay, let's move on. What's going on?
I assume you're opening emails. Because it's the last episode of the month. That's or maybe sometimes the first episode of the next month when we mess up the schedule.
I don't know if you know this, but I love emails.
It's really?
Just play along, man. This is the email episode.
Yes, and emails are terrific.
No, I genuinely do love the email episode.
So I love the email episode. Generally, this is the only type of email I like to interact with.
Sure.
Yeah. Like any other email, probably bad news.
Yeah.
But emails from listeners?
Yes.
A+. Yes. I'm there.
They have interesting things to say. They honestly, I mean, this sounds terrible, but they provide us a lot of ready-made topics to talk about.
They're way smarter than us. They should just all be doing their own podcasts. That is a big secret here.
Don't say that, man.
They can't hear us.
You cannot lead them to the logical conclusion here.
Look, I'll edit this part out. They'll never know. It's going to be fine.
All right. What's the email address?
techpod@content.town. It's just like the URL, but with one at where a dot would go otherwise. That's techpod@content.town.
That's right. Shall I begin?
Yeah, sure.
You had to think about it.
I was like, I thought maybe we could have I was like, yeah, okay, hit it, lay it on me. Give me. Let's turn some Q's into A's.
If you want me to sit here and complain about the lack of sunshine in this area of San Francisco.
It's been foggy and cold.
Oh my God.
I forgot to turn on the dehumidifier last night, Brad, and I woke up and the floor was clammy.
You know what? I have an email. The first email comes in from Brad in San Francisco.
Hey, Brad, what's your question?
What's your standard for the domestic humidity as regards the survival of your technology?
In normal non-Bay Area climates where I've lived, if the interior humidity hit 50%, I started thinking about turning on a dehumidifier.
Oh man, I'm in trouble.
In our house in Pacifica, if I can get it to 50%, I consider it a moral victory.
Okay, that's where I'm at, except that it is a constant struggle. Victory is as fleeting as it can possibly be, because the second you turn the thing off, it will start creeping right back up.
I mean, that's exactly it. We have the same dehumidifier recommended by Wirecutter.
Yes, we do.
And when I read the manual for it was like the most you'll ever be able to dump is 2 bins a day, and I think the bin is like 3 gallons. I can't remember. It's 15 or 20 pounds.
Yes, it's substantial.
And we can get 3 gallons. If I leave it running on the high setting 24/7, we can get 3 or sometimes 4, depending on when the last dump on the day before was.
You guys are significantly closer to the water than we are. Like you're a 5-minute walk or something, right?
Yeah, we're like a little bit under a mile.
So wait,
and
you own a house, have you not? That thing has just an output.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call that part. Valve.
It has a hose. It's a hose connector.
You can hook it into your plumbing. Like, have you not thought about doing that? Then you could just run it all the time.
It's really expensive. So the nice thing about the bucket is it serves as a gate on the cost of the electricity that goes into the thing.
Our power bill was pretty high this month.
Yeah.
Actually.
Like sometimes we have to shut the windows at night in the summertime because it's so wet outside.
Yeah.
So this is our humidity report for this week.
I guess so.
We should have just gone straight to the emails in retrospect.
No, dude, I need to know about this. This is a hot button issue around our house. That thing pumps so much hot air out as it's running, though. It's like that's the trade-off, right? It's like, do you want it to be drier in here? Well, then it's going to be 800 degrees.
Well, so one of the things that we do that one of our neighbors told us is important when you live in like really foggy areas of the West Coast is we have some chemical dehumidifiers that are like buckets with a desiccant in it, like the silica gel do not eat stuff basically, but supercharged. And they will suck water out of the air. And we put those in the closets with clothes so that the clothes don't get all musty smelling. We don't have to wash them like 3 times more than normal. But yeah, the humidity here blows.
It's bad.
Yeah,
it's gross. Okay,
it's bad.
I'm sorry.
This year, this year's the bad.
Also, I'm finding that not seeing the sun for the better part of a month is extra rotten when you can't go out and do anything.
Yeah,
you're stuck in your house pretty much 24/7, and there's no natural light. It's
look, I loaded up. We'll talk about this in the Patreon episode. I'm doing video game summer camp for my daughter because like a lot of her summer camps got canceled.
Yeah.
And I got Dolphin running and it ripped a bunch of my old GameCube and Wii discs. And I just looked at the load screen for Super Mario Sunshine for like 20 minutes this morning. I was like, man, Delfino Plaza looks fucking great. I'm ready to go, man. Put me in there.
When Mario Sunshine looks more appealing, you know times are dark. All right. I'll restart.
Speaking of times that are dark, what's our first email, Brad?
Okay, here we go. This is from Braden in Seattle. This is topical. This is current.
Okay.
A week or so ago, Cloudflare had some major issues, which caused Discord as well as some other services to stop working. I use a Pi-hole and Cloudflare's 1.1.1.1 as my DNS resolver, which may have contributed to the internet outage I had. It was a strange outage as Spotify never stopped playing, but websites and services seemed to shut down, not all at once, but rather over the course of several minutes. This was far spookier than the usual internet outages, or, you know, the usual internet cuts out and everything dies. My question is, what do you think a realistic worldwide internet outage or major disruption would look like? Outside of something like a solar flare, what could realistically disrupt the internet so much that it would more or less stop working for a few days? I know its distributed nature is supposed to make it survive things like a nuclear war, but what if, say, DNS or something just stopped working due to some unseen technical issues? I would also take any other stories about internet-related doomsday scenarios because, let's be honest, if they happen, 2020 is the year for them.
Well, okay, so in the old days, you used to have big internet outages because some guy with a backhoe in Reston, Virginia would chop a fiber that went into May East or something like that, and it would shut off routing for like 2/3 of the country.
Was
the people in the country.
Was that a genuine bottleneck? Like that was pretty much the only route between point A and B?
So it used to be that there were two main routing hubs in North America. One was May East, one was May West,
No
MAE.
kidding.
Yeah.
What era are we talking? 90s?
Like 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe early 2000s even. I feel like by the early 2000s, Google, like as soon as Google started running their own fiber, this was no longer a problem, right? But specifically, I remember somebody chopped a fiber going into one of those hubs, and it basically like overloaded all the other routers on the internet because they couldn't go through the preferred route. The thing about this Cloudflare thing that's weird is all of your DNS caching, like as long as your DNS was cached, you were fine.
Right.
And as soon as his DNS stopped being cached and it went out to ping the DNS server, then something that was previously working stopped working, which would be really, really creepy and would be a like weird thing to figure out. I think the bigger issue with internet outages right now is that like a pretty substantial percentage of like high double digits percentage of the internet is hosted on one of 5 major providers between AWS, Rackspace, Google, Azure, and I'm forgetting the other one. But anyway, like we're all running the same virtualized server. All the stuff is running on these virtualized servers in these huge data centers that are owned by one of 5 huge companies. And like, it's much less likely at this point that someone will chop some fiber that's really important to the internet than it is that like somebody at Amazon will upload the wrong dependency to their hypervisor for all the EC2 instances, and they'll all shut off across all the data centers and like as they cascade out. So I don't know. I kind of, you know, yeah, like living without internet last year when the fires happened, it made me really aware of how important internet is to us in terms of survival. Like we had to go to a McDonald's to pay our mortgage that month because we didn't have phone service and we couldn't pay the mortgage. But yeah, like I don't know what it looks like. I'd be curious. I'm sure we have people who are like into network hardening and stuff in the community. Yeah. So if you have like, I'm sure this is something people war game. I did some quick Googling. Nothing came up. I would love to hear what people think in terms of like worst case internet cascading failures and stuff. Like DNS is obviously a weak point because without your DNS cascades out. So you make your DNS changes and it all rolls out to all the other servers over like 24 to 48 hours. So if somebody figures out a hack on DNS, that's probably one of the first thing that goes. But beyond that, I don't know.
In a situation where DNS just failed across the board, which like there are so many providers at this point that's functionally impossible, I would guess. Because, you know, any one
but they're all using the same protocol.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not like there's
yeah, but I mean the protocol, like there's no centralized authority for that, right? I guess so. I mean, what are you talking about? Like some kind of vulnerability is discovered, or some kind of way to subvert the protocol itself, as opposed to specific providers serving it.
Well, I mean, so for a while, people were really concerned about poisoning DNS, which is like you injecting something that jacks up the DNS server and, then spreads. We as an industry, we've spent a fair amount of time hardening that stuff, so it's less of a threat. But I mean, there's always a chance that like the Linux DNS server will have some sort of massive flaw that nobody detected, and then whammy.
Right, just like whatever the industry standard implementation is that everybody's using. Yeah,
and like what did DNS servers run? Ubuntu and on Linux and FreeBSD.
There's a lot of FreeBSD out there in networking.
Yeah. So,
here's a random question. Okay, so actually, this is what I was going to ask in a hypothetical scenario where DNS like ceased to exist for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Would a person who had, let's say, like just a prodigious ability to memorize numeric IP addresses for everything experience any difference whatsoever? Like, let's say you had if you had an infinite capacity to remember the IP, and let's shove aside concerns like dynamic IPs changing periodically and stuff like that. Let's just say that you had a 1-to-1 ability to remember the actual IP of like every service you interfaced with. Like, couldn't you more or less continue to get along?
That's a good question.
Obviously, there are issues with like applications that aren't built for you to like input. They would be querying servers without your involvement. Like that would be a problem. But you get what I'm saying. Like if you could still communicate with everything through IP if you had that information and capability, right? That's
an interesting question. I bet that there's a lot of web apps that just don't work if you come in through an IP versus coming in through URL. URI.
Interesting. You think so? Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, that's an insane number. Like, first off, if you can memorize that many IPv6 addresses, you should really, you got some future in you in the card counting business. Just go to Vegas and get good at blackjack, man.
Or you're going to like rise through the ranks of the NSA very quickly.
Yeah. Or find some sort of street. I don't. Like if you're that good at memorizing numbers, I don't know what your hustle is, but there's got to be a better hustle than just like serving as the human DNS. Yes. Like you're a mentat at that point, right?
Yeah. This is a thought exercise, Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask is talking about the kind of quasi monopolies of like your Amazons and your Azures, and isn't IBM big in the compute space?
IBM does hosting as well, yeah.
When you talk about like somebody breaking a dependency across EC2 or whatever, I'm really curious how much like sandboxing and failover capacity and redundancy and et cetera, they have built in where it's not possible for them to hose the entirety of their service. It's like, oh, you might have killed it in this one data center, but all the other data centers are fine. You know what I mean? Or like let's say if like I don't know who is AWS's biggest client. I don't know. Like
Netflix
names.
Probably.
Sure. Like
or the DoD. One or the other.
But like, do they have systems in place to like fail VMs that are dying over to a different data center and have them resume? Stuff like that. Surely they have contingencies for that stuff.
So do you remember when we had the Whiskey Media panel of experts because AWS went down?
Yes.
And most of the internet was gone. That happened because of the Virginia data center, a problem specifically in the Virginia data center. But because that was one of the early data centers, a bunch of people had just never moved their shit out of there. So like, even though we had images of our servers in that data center, we couldn't move them to other data centers, was my understanding, because of the failure that happened there. So like we didn't have local backups or whatever and couldn't re-upload them to other places because that was ridiculous. Who would do that? But yeah, like there's the more complex the system, the more likely there to be some sort of failure that nobody's considered before.
Sure.
That brings the whole thing down. My assumption is that they roll out like low level hypervisor updates and stuff like that over long periods of time in different data centers. So hopefully that you won't see those problems. And also it's kind of unusual for attacks to jump from a client machine to a host machine.
Sure. I can see it.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll mention real quick, just in terms of redundancy in that space, I kind of dropped this for a while. I mean, I've been meaning to get back to it, but for a while I was looking into like a storage blob on Microsoft's Azure as a like
a backup.
Well, people on our Discord server talk about the whole like 3-2-1 backup thing of like have 3 backups, 2 local, 1 remote type stuff.
Yeah.
So I would get like a storage blob for just like old family home movies and like the stuff that I truly do not want to lose. And one of the options when you're setting that up in terms of like your payment plan is how much redundancy you want built in, because you can pay more to have the data hosted in more places. I think geographically in the same place versus different places. Even you can have, I think, multiple copies in the same data center, or specify you want copies in different data centers. And obviously there are, pricing tiers that go along with that.
How much does that cost? Like, just what's the baseline?
I'd have to look back into it again, because like, I mean, me and you are in a weird situation where we can't just use the nice flat rate Backblaze plan because we're running NASA's and not just Windows machines, like people
can, but it's a real pain
there's
in the
a bunch
ass.
of pain. It's a real pain in the ass to circumvent all that stuff. I don't want to get anything wrong here, but my fuzzy math last I looked made it look like the Azure storage blob, like the cold. Actually, what do they call it? There's like
there's like cold storage that's
cold
not
storage.
being accessed.
I want to say there's like glacier tier, or maybe that's an Amazon term. I forget. But yeah, there are like tiers of like, how often do you want to access this? How long do you want us to keep this? Blah blah blah. And I want to say the Azure looked like it was going to be the cheapest for something you never wanted to touch. For something that it was just like, if my entire house burns down and my fire safe fails and my safe deposit box gets robbed and everything else goes wrong, that data will still be there. Like, you never want to touch it, right? You just want to upload it and forget about it for 20 years. And it looked like that was going to be the cheapest last I checked. So,
but like $10 a month or
it's entirely dependent on how much you're storing,
Yeah.
Like it was fractions of a penny, I think, per gigabyte for the deepest storage, meaning the
least accessible, basically.
The least accessible. I would have to go.
Yeah.
They have a chart up on their site. It's pretty easy to compare. But again, that was for the tier where it's like, I'm never going to download this or ask to retrieve it unless every other method fails.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a tier where you assume there's going to be a cost if you have to download it.
Yes, you will pay some significant amount of money to get the data out, but to just keep it there as a backup is pretty cheap.
Interesting.
Anyway, yeah. All right. Next email is from Joe in Chicago. My loyal and very old Nook Glow Light was lost to screen failure right at the beginning of lockdown life, and I've been waiting to replace it until something new or more exciting comes along. What do you guys think of the development and future of these devices? I guess he's talking primarily about e-readers here. Have you seen any of the new color e-ink devices that are slowly coming into the market? That's pretty much it. Well, he also asks, have you ever considered doing an episode around air conditioning? I guess we almost did just now.
Yeah, we were very dangerously close to that.
Getting very close, except nobody around here has it. It's maybe the most utilitarian and least snazzy of tech. But it's really important and will only be more so as the temperatures rise in so many urban concentrations.
So I looked a little bit at this because of this question. I don't. There's two things that are important. If you're going to buy a dedicated e-book reader, like a Kindle or a Nook or whatever, like having a good backlight and having good resolution and contrast on the ink to the paper, or air quoting paper, but the background are the things that I cared about. In my experience, the color e-ink stuff, the saturation, like I would want that to read comic books, because the refresh rate's not going to be good enough that you can watch video or do anything that has any kind of motion. But for digital comics, it would be dope. The saturation on the color e-ink stuff is so low that even though it looks kind of okay now, like I still would rather read a comic book on a transmissive LCD screen where you actually get full representation of colors and it looks better than it does on paper, than like the version that's going to look slightly shittier than it does on paper.
Sure.
So I'm a Kindle. We're a Kindle house just because that's where we bought all of our ebooks. But the new Paperwhites are rad. We replaced one a few years ago when the battery started swelling, and it was like $25 for a battery or $75 for a new Kindle. And we just bought a new Kindle because it was better and faster and cheaper and all that stuff. I think like it's funny. I went from being a 100% Kindle reader over the last 10 years to mostly just using my phone because it's always with me in my pocket.
Really?
And battery life is never a problem anymore.
For books?
for
like
books.
not magazine articles, but like an actual novel.
Book-ass books.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know that I could
like
do it.
Most of the time I'm reading, I'm like, well, not right now, but like if I'm getting my oil changed or something, I have 20 minutes to kill.
Sure. That makes sense.
Then I whip the book out.
Like you might forget you wouldn't remember to bring your e-reader, but you've got your phone already.
Yeah, and like if I'm laying in bed about to go to bed, sometimes I'll pop out and do a Sudoku or something, and then I'll read my book, and I can't be asked to change devices for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I still like an e-ink screen just for the lack of eye strain. Like it's pretty easy on the eyes.
I do. It's funny. I need to go. Like I should have gone to the eye doctor about the time that the quarantine started, because I've noticed that my astigmatism's getting worse. I'm starting to see like vibration, like the letters look like they're different heights on the page, which is always the, hey, I need to go get my eyes checked sign for me. And the e-ink, for whatever reason, accentuates that, and the LCD doesn't. So
interesting.
Yeah. So this also may be a temporary thing, I guess is what I'm saying. We'll see.
We're also Kindle only here for e-readers, so I don't have any experience with Nooks or other companies' products in that vein. But I have a question for you, which is outside of the quality of the screen, which I think at this point is quite good, right? Like even the entry level Paperwhite has like the very high DPI, like nice, professional looking print quality text. Like that stuff's fine. Yep. But outside of that, why do Kindles feel like they are rooted in like 15-year-old technology? Like,
what do you mean?
They're super thick. They're very slow. They've got really bad backlight bleed. Like they're all like a bunch of just like crappy like quality of life problems with Kindles. I feel like they're incredibly slow to boot for a device that essentially only needs to manage downloading and displaying text.
Well, they're really low.
Is it a power consumption thing?
Yeah, they're really slow. Yeah. I mean, they're intentionally slow so that the battery lasts 2 weeks.
Yeah, I guess so.
Or a month. Like I charge my Kindle maybe once a month. It's
like the battery life is amazing, but I would think they could like ramp it up a little bit when you're using it and then go into some kind of standby mode when you're not. I don't know.
I feel like that's a category that got good enough in like 2012 and that we've seen very little.
Well, so that's kind of what I mean is that they feel like they have not changed in 8 years, and like for the world's largest corporation now, that feels like.
Well, so the one thing that has changed is on the high end. The thing you get from going from the $70 one to the $200 one is waterproofness.
Yeah, that helps.
Which, as somebody who likes to read at the beach and at the pool, that's
true.
Like I always feel like a jackass with a Ziploc bag holding up my Kindle at the beach.
I've always had the lower cost. Like I guess Paperwhite line, but I know the high end. What is it? The
Oasis is
Voyage,
the
and then the Oasis is the like I know that thing is like I know that thing is super thin and probably more usable in some ways. But
we haven't talked about this, but I don't like super thin stuff if it has any kind of weight. So when you're looking at, I was looking at that Pocket Analog, which is pre-orders are up next week for that thing, and it looks really uncomfortable to hold because it's so thin. I like a thicker device. Like I want a Game Boy thickness device because that thing, my giant claws can wrap around and be comfortable.
Something to get a grip on.
Yeah, I don't need this everything to be like paper thin.
Yeah, that's fair. You want to talk about UPSs?
You're going to talk about your nut server?
No.
Yes,
I was going to.
Yes, I do.
You don't want to hear about the nut server?
Look, we've talked about the nut server a lot.
Man, it's so cool though. All right. Okay. This is from Andrew. Howdy. I was just curious what your philosophy was when it came to looking for an uninterruptible power supply. So I just have a few broad questions. What electronics do you hook up to it? How much power do you look for? Just enough battery to safely shut everything off shortly after an interruption? Or do you want your stuff to function for possibly hours without power? This is a good question that I was actually just thinking about the other day myself, and I don't know the answer to. If I hooked up a UPS to my modem and router, does the internet typically work if the entire neighborhood and surrounding areas lose power? I've never actually thought about where the internet to my house gets its power from. And then his last question, any type of battery to look for in a UPS, and how often do you need to replace or buy a new one?
So
that's a lot of questions.
I used to be a UPS guy. Yeah. And I'm not a UPS guy anymore because the battery maintenance was enough of a pain in the ass and cost that I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to take my chances.
Okay.
It's probably fine.
So I just became a UPS guy about 6-8 months ago, as we have documented. So maybe you're just me several years into the future, but like What specifically is like? Here's my real question: do the batteries, like, I haven't had like a major power event since to set this stuff up. Do the batteries deteriorate steadily even if you don't stress them by like having to discharge them a lot?
Lead acid so it depends on whether you have lead acid or lipo, but my assumption is unless you spend a buttload of money, then you got lead acid batteries in your UPS.
Yeah.
And they're good, like every other kind of battery, they're good for a certain number of charge and discharge cycles, and the UPSs constantly are conditioning them. The problem I had was that when I was doing UPSs, it was also during the time that PC power consumption was spiking.
Okay.
So we were going from like a 200 watt max draw to 700 watt max draw to 1100 watt power supplies that are drawing like 900 watts under load.
Was that like the GeForce leaf blower era?
Yeah, that was like the 5800 era. So basically, it was really easy to kill a UPS by plugging in like a giant CRT and a big ass gaming computer. You just overdraw the battery and it would fuck up the chemistry in it, and then you'd have to buy a new battery for $80 or whatever, which is probably $30 shipping,
which is like close to the cost of a consumer entry level UPS to begin with.
Well, so the problem with the UPS is the cost is battery and shipping because they're heavy as hell and the batteries are a pain in the ass. So yeah, I just don't bother anymore. I looked when our power was out and like the internet and Verizon's batteries for their cell towers conked out after 2 days of no power. I looked at what it would cost to do a UPS that would run internet even like off and on for a little bit. And the TLDR was that my modem and router draw so much power that it's good for maybe 2 or 3 hours, which is just it's not worth the hassle.
Yeah.
So I think instead we're going to do a battery and panels when we have to replace our roof in a couple of years.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Get some kind of power wall situation.
Something like that. Yeah. I don't know if we're going to do the Tesla one just on general principle, but it seems like that's the reasonable price. And yeah. So yeah.
Just to throw my 2 cents in on a couple of his questions. I definitely got it just to gracefully shut everything down as fast as possible after the power goes out, not to actually try to run much of anything on it for any period of time. But I saw about the same numbers as you, as far as keeping just our basic internet connection active. That probably 2.5, 3 hours tops for that, which is kind of whatever. Like that's, if you can't just do without it, basically. Like who cares?
And so on the connection front, if you have fiber, it might work depending on where the CO for the fiber termination is. If it terminates in your neighborhood, it'll conk out whenever the batteries for that thing conk out. If it's in like a central office someplace, which it can be sometimes, you might be okay. Because like, I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of a phone company central office.
Oh,
but
I bet it's a nightmare.
Oh, okay. So there's nightmares of cables on some floors, and then the other floors are just stacks and stacks and stacks of lead acid batteries piled up in or sometimes fuel cells now, probably. I don't know, because you can hook those up to natural gas and generate electricity. But yeah, if you're on cable when the power goes out, you're probably hosed. If you're on DSL when the power goes out, you're probably hosed. If you're on cell phone, sometimes when the power goes out, you're hosed. So, you
forgot to mention the floor of the phone company where they're constantly making human sacrifices to their dark masters.
Look, the
phone company joke.
Why do you think they add that extra $5 a month on every 3 years? Is because their Dark Lord Cthulhu requires it.
Yes, they just need to keep that blood of the unwashed flowing. I don't know if hatred for the phone company traffics now the way it did 30 to 50 years ago, but
I think Comcast has more than spread their wings.
Sure.
Take over that.
The evils of telecom have changed, but they haven't gone away.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I should have had an email lined up for now. Here's a nice one that's not really a question. It's more of a tip from Chris in Arlington.
I like tips.
It's about cable organization. I got rid of my tubs of different cables and just got one of those cheap closet shoe organizers to put cables in. No longer do I have to dig through the tub, but my girlfriend and son can find cables without even having to ask me to dig for one. He included a photo. Chris, I don't know how you feel about this. I might just make this photo the show art.
This is brilliant.
If you think he would be okay with this, because it is a thing of beauty. It is just a floor to ceiling. It's an entire door covered with tidy little pouches full of cables that are immaculately organized, and I'm sure, just eminently accessible.
I might have not felt like this in a long way.
I think I might have to steal this idea. I've got 3 tubs that I'm relatively happy with. Like, I feel like I can find most of what I'm looking for, but I do have to dig. This is pretty nice, man.
Wow. I'm just overawed with this. This is such a good solution for this problem.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris. Good job.
Yes.
I mean, I
will include this image one way or another, maybe in the show notes, just because people need to see this, take inspiration.
I would be slightly more impressed if they were labeled. Yeah. I'll be honest. Yeah. But I mean, I see like it looks like a Wii component cable down here in the bottom. This is some good work.
It's good stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of good work, here is an email from Ben. I'm really enjoying the show, and last week's trip down memory lane was a lot of fun. If you point your Gopher client of choice, you have a Gopher client of choice, right?
Is it Gopher?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, okay.
At this point, or that one web-based one you can find. Actually, I went to my NAS and totally installed a Gopher client after that episode last week.
Oh, no.
I haven't actually used it yet. Also, we really all need to start playing Legend of the Red Dragon. Anyway.
I'm down to play.
We should all play Lord. If you point your Gopher client of choice at a Gopher / Gopher.hardill, that's HARDILL.me.uk, you should find my entry to the challenge of podcast delivery via Gopher. It needs a little bit more work to extract the descriptions for each episode as well as the MP3, but I'll probably get that done before the next episode at the weekend.
Wow.
He did it.
I've just installed there's a Gopher client for Windows called Simple Gopher Client by Shipwreck Software.
You can test it right now?
I'm launching it.
Okay. Live Gopher test?
Live Gopher test. I can't figure out how to work this.
Just going to dig up the yard of the internet. That's
URL.
Probably where
there
the Gopher.
Go.
Actually, do you think that is where the Gopher name came from? It's like it conjures images of tunneling and digging for things and networking tunnels together. Help me out here.
This is so good.
Yeah. How's it look?
I'm reading Ben's blog right now, but I'm reading it in Gopher.
Did you find the podcast?
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Episode 45, the No Tonsil Stone Zone. PC Gamers West Fenland stops by to talk about turning an old PC into a new router. Why would you want to roll your own router in the first place? What are your hardware and software options to do so? What kind of fancy new network stuff you need to do with it? The answers lie within.
You need to
support
read
the pod.
You need to read it in more of a pixelated font voice.
It's Courier New, man. This text is the same width, regardless of whether.
Oh man, fuck!
I just downloaded.
Let's not even start talking about monospace fonts. Oh my god.
Oh man,
after switching to the new Windows terminal, I spent so much time going through fonts trying to find something I could live with.
So let's see. I think it only downloaded 50 megabytes of the file, though.
Okay. Well, work yet to be done.
Nope. 500 kilobytes. My bad.
This podcast is too extreme for Gopher.
Yeah, we're keeping it real at a high level here.
Decades old protocols cannot accommodate the work that we are doing here.
Oh, I'm amazed. Yeah, I love this so much.
That's cool.
Thank you, Ben.
That's good stuff.
He's now my favorite Ben. Congratulations, Ben.
Dang, man.
I don't know many Bens.
I know a lot of Bens all of a sudden. I didn't know a single Ben for my entire life until the last 4 or 5 years, and now I know a large number. Let's say.
There you go.
I guess there was a Ben wave.
There's a Ben boom back in the mid 90s.
The great Ben wave of of 89.
Yep.
All right. We did. Fucking time has no meaning anymore. When did we do tech horror stories?
Gina has it was the end of last month, I think.
What's her theory?
Gina has a theory about this. Okay. She thinks that instead of, because all the days are exactly the same, sleeping is now just like a nap. So like if you have a 4-day project, it can be a 1-day project with 3 naps in between.
You know what? That is about the best description of this lifestyle as I have heard. so far, because that is pretty much exactly accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of multi-day projects, and they seem like they go really fast.
Right.
Woo.
Like days are kind of whatever. Like sometimes it's light outside, sometimes it's not, but who cares?
I went to bed at 3:00 last night. I couldn't sleep. I was awake. I was doing something productive. That's fine, right?
It's all the same shit at this point. Anyway,
we had some good horror stories as the TLDR here.
Yes, we've gotten a few more. And I was going to read a couple of them.
I love it.
What say you? Okay. Except I totally lost. Talk amongst yourself for 2 seconds.
Wait.
Never mind. I'm sorry. I saved you. You don't have to worry about it. I found it. All right, here's one. From Riley. I used to work for a large corporation at their electronics materials division. At a site that produced, among other things, sputtering targets for processor manufacturing. Before I get any deeper into this email, have you ever heard the term sputtering target?
Yep.
Because that was a new one on me.
Ask me if I know what it means.
So do you know what sputtering target means?
Nope.
Okay. I'm going to type sputtering target into... I mean, I've inferred what it means from the rest of this email, but I don't know.
I think it spits stuff at the disk to apply a thin layer of metal, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, I was really just curious where the sputtering part came in, but yeah, maybe it's just something about the action of the process. Anyway, Riley worked at a site that produced, among other things, sputtering targets for processor manufacturing, the target being the large disk of metal that is transferred onto the wafers layer by layer to build the processor. We controlled the alloys down to parts per billion. Our site being one of only a few in the world that could produce 99.99999% copper, or 7 nines, as we called it internally.
Wow, that's a lot of nines.
Yeah. The machinery that produces the processors can be identical at different manufacturers. So 2 sputtering targets can be dimensionally the same, but going to 2 different companies. The alloy is usually different between manufacturers. Each has their own special atomic sauce. So one day in our facility, someone put 2 dimensionally the same targets on the same workspace. One was for Intel and the other for Texas Instruments. So the alloys were similar in appearance, but vastly different on the parts per billion scale. The 2 targets should never have been on the same workspace, but every industry has that person.
No.
That person is in near quotes. So the targets got mixed up and shipped to the wrong processor manufacturers, one of whom installed and ran it. $5 million in failed processors was the result.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That's a harsh one. You think that's
I think that's the most expensive one we've gotten.
Yes, by
so
far.
far.
That's the only instance I know of somebody joining the 5 million club.
We had a couple of 7-figure clubs, but I think they were mostly on the low ones.
Yeah. You think is that a career ender?
No. So the big takeaway from all of this is that if you work someplace that's decent and you make a mistake that costs $1 million, it's probably the problem with the process that let you do that mistake.
It's the learning experience. Yes.
Yeah. And that like they shouldn't have you should not have been allowed to make a mistake that was that costly.
Yeah.
The other thing we learned from that episode, well, we learned 2 other things. One is that if you're in, are we going to do the operating room IT thing?
Oh, we can.
We don't have to. I mean, we got a bunch of emails about this. It was maybe the most things we've ever gotten an email about.
Yeah.
You only have to scrub in if you're going to touch somebody. But if you're in the operating room while somebody's being operated on, you probably do have to put on like clean scrubs,
sterile garments,
hair covering, and maybe a mask, depending on what kind of surgery it is.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah.
I will say this email does imply that this particular instance was negligent. Let's say. Yes.
Yeah, I think there was a big conversation in the Discord about this when this episode was fresh, and the basic upshot was from people who work in like chip fabs and places like that like if you were allowed to move the thing in a way that it wasn't labeled properly and wasn't like denoted which one it was, but it was otherwise functionally identical, the process was the problem, not the employee.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. You should build your processes to assume that people are going to make mistakes.
Yeah, that's fair.
And this person should be fired into the sun, clearly.
Obviously. Get the catapult ready.
Right. Turn their remains into a bunch of TI-99 4As.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to build a catapult capable of achieving escape velocity?
I'm pretty sure there's a TV show that would have talked about that if it was possible.
Oh,
I can't imagine. I don't think, how would you, like the amount of, because the problem isn't, instantaneous thrust. Well, okay. So yes, yes, you can fire something fast enough that it would probably leave the atmosphere, but could somebody be on it and survive? No, they'd
specifically, I said catapult. Like I'm sure you could build like a railgun or something.
Well, but like you need
sufficiently
thrust.
Advanced, right? Well, that's okay. That's fair.
Yeah, like momentary thrust doesn't do as much as you'd think. Like this is why like ion engines are good, right? It's because you can do a little tiny bit of thrust over a really long period of time, and that's way more efficient.
Well, obviously, I would assume. I mean, I should preface this by saying I'm not an engineer, but I would assume you could achieve a speed high enough to overcome any degradation in velocity before you got out, right?
Well,
it's just that would be extremely fast.
So I'm not an engineer either, but I played a lot of Kerbal Space Program. So
basically the same thing.
Yeah, it's pretty much like the thing is the air. When you're at low altitudes, the friction due to the air is such that you're not going to be able to accelerate. Like you're going to reach terminal velocity in the air pretty quickly. And then once you get to the point that the air thins out, you need some additional thrust to keep accelerating as the air gets thinner and you can accelerate easier. So I think, no, I don't think you can build a catapult that'll fire you into even suborbital. I mean, you can make a suborbital catapult. I don't think you can do a suborbital catapult that will go to space.
That was a mouthful.
That's my final answer, Brad.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
Suborbital catapult. Man, that's a tough one.
Suborbital catapult. Suborbitable shit.
Suborbitable executable.
Hey, I feel personally attacked now.
Suborbitable Caterpillar. I don't know why Caterpillar wants to come out there. There, yes. All right. Here's one more horror story, which does not have a name on it.
Probably best.
It's fun. They don't describe this as their mistake. I was listening this week, and the talk about drive shredding trucks that come to you reminded me of this. I worked for Apple for a while, and obviously we had lots of old phones around. In the back of our repair area, we had a shred bin. Now, this bin had its drop-in slot on the top with a little slant down. It was right next to the bathroom, too. So one day, a tech is walking with an old phone meant for our e-waste or disposal pile, all of which was sent back to Apple, and had to go to the bathroom. So they put their phone on the shred bin, and it fell in. Because it was junk, it was forgotten.
Oh, no.
Later that day, and so they didn't mention this, but I gather that the bin they're talking about is actually a paper shredding bin, not a phone shredding bin.
Look, shredding a phone is shredding some electronics is shredding stuff with batteries is a bad idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Later that day, the paper shred truck came to shred all of our paper. If you aren't aware, shredded paper is insanely flammable. It's why most household paper shredders.
Wait, is it flammable or inflammable?
Well, I don't know. I'll read on. You be the judge.
Okay.
If you aren't aware, shredded paper is insanely flammable. That's why most household paper shredders have a ton of safety mechanisms. Because not only are the small pieces of paper obviously combustible, the paper dust is basically aerosolized fire starter.
Yeah.
So the truck comes, grabs the paper. 3 minutes later, the entire huge truck is burning so hot, the metal fused into the asphalt.
Oh, shit.
Apple paid for everything from what I was told, and we got new bins with the slot on the front this time.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty... I don't know how much shredded paper would you be talking about? I mean, I guess a whole truck, the rear end full, right?
I mean, those trucks are like garbage trucks. They roll around.
Right.
They have a big
They're 90% capacity, right? Storage capacity.
Yeah, you've been to the shredder porn channels on YouTube, right?
Oh. I mean, I've heard of the does it blend type stuff, but
they can shred cars. They have shredders that are big enough to put cars into.
Wow.
Like you can shred anything, it turns out. But yeah, I can't imagine. That's a terrifying amount of fire.
It's quite a bit.
Lithium battery fires are scary, even without like the added bonus of an enclosed bomb full of fuel air bomb, basically. Ugh.
Yes, chemicals.
Yeah,
stay away. That's my policy.
Some chemicals are good for us, Brad.
Like what?
H2O.
Okay. You're going to get me with your dihydrogen
monoxide.
I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Can't get one over on me. All right. Last email? Let's call it the last email.
Brad, we had a lot of really good emails this month, by the way. This was a crop.
This was like double the amount of time we usually spend before this going through these trying to pick out emails because there were so many. Brad should learn JavaScript. Signed, a Brad who learned JavaScript. I looked at his email address, which is impossible to fake, and it says Brad right there in it. So he's telling the truth about at least one half of that.
Definitely a Brad.
Yes. Why? What do you think what is he getting at? Why is he telling me to learn JavaScript?
Well, you had said you felt like you should learn how to program a few episodes ago.
No, I know the ostensible reason.
I think JavaScript's a pretty useful thing to learn.
What's the real reason?
Maybe he wants more Brads, and maybe he has a Usenet group for Brads who are into JavaScript. It's like alt.javascript.brad.brad.brad.
alt.programming.javascript.brads.gotta.stick.together.
Yeah.
I guess.
I think you should it's funny, like it seems like the learning to program languages these days are JavaScript or Python.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Or, I mean, some people still do C, I suppose, but.
Yeah, well, that's such a lower level and more involved thing.
Yeah.
If you just want to get off the ground and start producing something useful, one of those, although I saw engineers maligning JavaScript this very day about something.
It's not perfect, but it's a scripting language. And like once you learn one scripting language, you just have to pick up syntax. Like it's kind of seems like it'd be useful.
Yeah.
So
I first of all, I've kind of fallen off the programming thing because I haven't thought of a good project to apply it to, which I found is something I need.
I have a really good project, but I haven't had time to dig into it. I'm not going to talk about it here. It's too good.
That's fair.
I emailed it to myself. We'll talk about it later.
That's fair. I was looking at Python seemed like a sensible place to start for if and when I actually do get into that stuff a little bit.
Well, yeah, especially given like the most of the stuff you'd be starting with probably is NAS related, and being able to run Python scripts is pretty easy.
Yes. Did you know that I don't know how I ended up on this. I found Rivers Cuomo of Weezer has a GitHub account and he codes.
What
I'm not even a huge Weezer fan. Like I
love Weezer. Weezer's great.
I loved the Blue Album when I was in high school, but that's about it.
The Blue Album. Wow. Okay, never mind.
Anyway,
it was a college album for me, but okay. Yes. Continue.
It was probably like a preschool album for some people listening to this, so that works both ways. But I should send you that. It's weird. Like there's something on there that he seemed to use to help them out on tour with like locations to stuff. And also he writes.
That's awesome.
He also seems to scribble lyrics in the comments of his Python.
If your parents were, if you were conceived while your parents were listening to the Blue Album, let us know.
Some weird rock stars with GitHub accounts writing code is my dystopian cyberpunk
I like
fetish. I don't know.
Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something really appealing about famous people doing normal nerd shit.
Yeah,
that isn't it's humanizing. Self-promoting.
It is humanizing in some way, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're just like us.
Yeah, nerds. Hey, look, if Rivers Cuomo could be the biggest nerd in the world, we'd love to have him on the show. Rivers, if you're listening, call us. We'll have you on. We can talk about your GitHub.
They're just like us. They go grocery shopping. They eat ice cream cones. They write Python.
At Maximum PC, do you have any idea how much mental bandwidth we spent on the Stars Are Just Like Us page on Us Weekly?
Wait, did you actually wait? Oh, I thought you were going to say you guys had one of those.
No. We so my boss at the time, who was one of Jeff's former bosses, Jeff Gersman's former bosses, it was obsessed with that because he looked at it as like the perfect front of book / last page thing I could in a magazine.
Yeah, like it's fluff.
It's sticky. It's light. It's surprisingly thoughtful. Like it's always, it's the kind of thing that like, if you get an Us Weekly, everybody looks at. Like it's the 100% page, the one that everybody who picks up that magazine takes a look at it to see what Britney Spears is doing at Target at 10 o'clock at night. And we talked about how to make more magazine pages that were like that on like in terms of magazine craft a lot. It was a key thing.
Yeah.
But the email address is techpod@content.town. If you would like to send us an email, we would love to hear from you.
And you would like to send us an email.
Yeah, send us an email.
You were getting very sleepy. and then you will write us an email. That's my attempt at mass hypnosis.
As I'm really sleepy, Brad. I can't go on. But before we leave, we have to thank the patrons because it's the last episode of the month, and there's a whole bunch of them. I think. Because I realize now that we might have not done that last week. I can't remember. But as always, we would like to thank our executive producer patrons, Andrew Cotton, David Allen, Jacob Chappell, and Kurt Brownridge, as well as our associate producer patrons, Arthur Geese, CJ Rebeda, Dan Brockman, Dave Yulian, Graham Banks, Jad Rita, Sam Buck, The Bunny Fiend, Thomas Shea, and Thomas Shea. That's it. I realized we did this last week. It wasn't actually the last episode of the month. So
bonus acknowledgement.
Associate patrons get double acknowledged this month. You're welcome.
See, that's what happens when you support this podcast. You get more for your money.
Wait, no, this is the first episode of the next month. We've double thanked. Oh well, that's right. Fine. This thank you will stand.
Everyone. Yes, thank you to everyone. Patrons.
Yeah, they're good enough. They're worth thanking twice.
Absolutely.
And thanks to everybody who supports the Tech Pod. If you want to find out how you can support the show, you can go to patreon.com/TechPod. And if you sign up, even at the lowest $2 level, you can get access to the Tech Pod Discord, which is a fantastic, wonderful community of nerds just like you who want to learn more about the way the world around them works. That's and right. There's constant sharing of information. There was a really extended, entirely too in-depth conversation about how much latency different types of splitters and different ways of capturing video add to your video streams. Yeah. And we had like experts from three different.
Yes, that's what I was. Yes, there were multiple disciplines started weighing in on that conversation.
At one point I was like, who's going to know about this? The fighting game guy. Right, so like we called in the fighting game guy. He's like, People that work in video production, people that program, people who write GPU, like low level GPU
have
code,
graphics programming backgrounds.
It was rad.
It is very entertaining indeed.
And that stuff is happening now. It seems like we have enough people around the world that when I was up at 4:00 last night, the Discord was still popping. People still in there chatting.
Yeah. It is a surprisingly international audience, which I always extremely appreciate because
it's really nice.
I love both absorbing culture and also getting different perspectives from people who live in different places.
Yeah, the Australians are down with their knifey spoony working the night shift. So that'll do it for us this week. Patreon exclusive episode should be out now. And you can hear that at patreon.com/techpod. Brad, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you get your humidity sitch under control.
It's so sticky in here.
Moist.
It's gross. It's not even hot. It's like it's just damp. It's like it's a 70 to 73 degrees kind of situation, but it's just so damp.
The worst thing, I hate getting up in the morning and my feet hitting the hardwood and it being like moist.
It's just
like
sticky.
Clammy. Ugh. Yeah, I'm gonna go wash my sheets. See y'all next week.